Hello everyone, this is Defense Politics Asia and welcome to the Frontline History. And I haven't done the Frontline History for a super long time and because this is the new year. So Happy New Year to you and Happy New Year to the Hawaiians. This will be the first time I actually say, you're actually in the new year. So welcome to real time. And so people suggested that they want to see the difference between the 1st of January to the end of 2024. So how much have the Ukraine theater have changed over the past year? And so this is a frontline history, and let's take a look. We will go in anti-clockwise direction from Kherson, and then we'll go into some of these 2024's unique offensive that the unique fronts that wasn't exist at the beginning of the year. So let's start off with Kherson. So in Kherson, basically there's really nothing much. The only main thing that is different is Krinky. So you can see this darker purplish color. This is the map, the front line at the beginning of the year in 2024. So at the beginning of 2024, we have Krinky. The Battle of Krinky is one of these saddest operation in Ukraine, in the Ukraine war. I think historians and people who follow the war will look back at Krinky, feeling really, really depressed and very sad. I think this is one of the most ill-fated planned military operation in the Ukraine war history. This is the most terrible operation. It's really up there with the Zaporizhzhia offensive. It's really horrible. People just sat there constantly trying to hold a totally flattened town over literally nothing. There is no strategic value. This area is extremely difficult to hold, and yeah, that's the main gist. And as you can see, by the end of the year, the Russians even crossed the river, crossed the Konka River, and actually incurred into the other side, into the islands opposite of Krinky. The entire Ukrainian force that was over at Krinky was entirely wiped out. They was entirely wiped out. A lot of Marines, a lot of well-trained troops died for Krinky, which is extremely depressing. It reminds me of this movie that I watched. It's called Hamburger Hill. It's a Vietnam War movie where the American GIs went on this very, very difficult operation to conquer this hill. It's a heavily entrenched, heavily fortified. I'm not sure if it's Viet Cong or is it the North Vietnamese troops hill, and they fought very, very hard. They even got friendly fire by their own bombers. The A4 fly over and then they bombed their own troops, and they finally defeated and conquered the hill. And the most depressing part of this movie is that despite they conquered the hill, they actually abandoned it. They actually retreated. They did not hold the hill. And that is one of those depressing things about Vietnam War, where a lot of the time, because they always just go helicopter and they just land and attack and conquer or destroy the enemy, then they leave. And then the Vietnamese just return and retake the position, making the initial operation entirely pointless. Krinky is very similar to that situation, except that instead of them conquering the place and leaving it, they took the place and died there, and then they continue to send more men to die there, and until they just is unable to send any more men, and that's Krinky. So yeah, so that's the only real frontline change per se in this region. That so you can see there's really no much change in the Kherson Front. We go into the Zaporizhzhia Front. At the Zaporizhzhia Front, we have major changes, mainly over in the Robotine region, as well as in the north of Nestelianka. So if we go to the Nestelianka one first, there is some change per se, in this KMSK. The Ukrainians actually in the last month of 2024 actually retook Kherson and some part of in the south of Kherson, taking advantage of the rotation or the ceasefire to allow the atomic agency, the IAEA officials, to rotate at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and the Ukrainians took advantage of the lack of Russian soldiers at the front line, and they took position, attracted fat bombs, and yeah, it is not free. You take the position, you got to eat some bombs. So that was what happened at Kamsky. But there is this frontline change in favor of the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians also took some more positions around Pyatikaki, perhaps. Maybe, but not very significant per se in that sense. At Nestilianka, the Russian forces actually expanded control in the north and in the northeast of Nestilianka. And this came late, also in December of 2024. These are all very late maneuvers. And the fighting at this moment is still happening over in the Nestilianka towards Novoandriivka region, which is just further up north. So let me so they're still moving in this direction towards Novoandriivka, and this marks a possible new operation from the Russian side to really do something in this front line. So tentatively is super slow. So no, because maybe all the Kiev is there, and maybe the entrenchment here is just very heavy. The Russians are not making a lot of headway. Of course, the most significant is the Robotyne and the Verbove region in this Orikhiv sector in the Zaporizhzhia Front. And this is mainly the Russian reversal of Ukrainian captures during their 2023 counteroffensive. And it's amazing that the Ukrainian major counteroffensive was already more than a year ago. It's just crazy how fast time has flown by. And some of these major captures, particularly the Ukrainians capturing of this part of this Surovikin line, was totally negated. The Russians have retook it. The Russians have retook Robotyne, which is a major failure of the Ukrainians. And then the positions northwest of Robotyne was also taken by the Russian forces. The Russians also stormed back to retake the entrenchment, the Surovikin line. This is basically the first line of defense of the Surovikin line, and the Russians have retook it, and they have also secured Verbove's entrance in the northwest of Verbove. They even expanded control in the north of Verbove, in moving westward, and taking some of the positions. But this captures across a year of operations is not a lot of change for 1 year. So it does shows either the Ukrainians are defending this area super well, or the Russians are not very motivated to capture more grounds in this area. Because further up north, in this area here, this area here is a bit harder to defend. The Russians lost these positions pretty quickly in the initial stage of the 2023 counteroffensive by the Ukrainians. So that is understandable of that they don't want to waste soldiers trying to conquer useless lands. And the Russians also seems to have taken positions. They have taken Luhivsky, which wasn't a thing. It wasn't under Russian control. Russian forces took Luhivsky and basically go close to Bilokhaya. So this is also another part. I think this capture is a lot less they didn't attract much attention, I would say. Like, even I myself largely forgotten that Luhivsky was actually a 2024 capture. So which is why we are doing this frontline history, and we are able to see all these difference, all these changes over the past years. So I think this is actually a very interesting development. We have fighting reported at Bilokhaya just on the 27th of December, just recently. So this is definitely yet another front line to watch. And if you look from the general direction, you can see that the Russians are making small pushes on the two flanks of Orikhiv Front. whereas they have made some significant push from the south, which is the main front, and it remains to be seen whether the Russians wanted to do this massive pincer on Kyiv. But yeah, this is very bullish, tentatively, and yeah, I don't think they're going to do it. So small changes at Marne, not very important, and small changes at Mafopil as well, towards Huyai, also not super important per se, small little changes. And we go into the Donetsk Front, leading from the Velyka Novosilka sector all the way to Avdiivka. And this is a massive amount of ground capture. So the current front line looks something, this is the very rough line. It looks something like this. This is the current line. And in 2024, in the 1st of January 2024, the line was here. This was the line. Yeah, in case there's too many icons, it's not very obvious, so I draw it out. This was the line. The Russians basically have taken massive amount of grounds over in the Niu-York front at the Donetsk region, and the conquest of Avdiivka leads to the entire collapse of the area, leading to the beginning of the Bakhmut Front. The Vuhledar also have collapsed, leading to the entire collapse of the region around Vuhledar, pushing all the way towards the Constantinople sector. Velyka Novosilka sector also have collapsed, with the Russian forces now threatening Vremivka, and of course the fall of Krasnohorivka leads to the entire collapse of the western part of Donetsk, and basically threatening Kharkiv, which as per now, at this moment, Kharkiv is on the verge of capture by the Russian forces. So Niu-York has fallen as well over the Donetsk Front, which is previously known as the Niu-York Front as well. So this is the massive, the biggest difference, I would say, in 2024, where the Russians really sucker punch the Ukrainians. Of course, there is also very massive developments of 2024, which is the Kharkiv Front, as well as the Kursk Front, where the Ukrainians launched their Kursk offensive. So definitely this is definitely not the only major thing, but I would say that this is the most strategically significant one. And of course, this is only doable because of the Kharkiv offensive by the Russians, and then subsequently exacerbated by the Ukrainian Kursk offensive, which draw even more attention away from the other front line, leading to increased Russian captures over in this Donetsk region. So this is massive. We're gonna zoom in and we can analyze a bit more. The Velyka Novosilka sector is a pretty recent thing over the past few months, where the Russians have retaken Levadne. They have now pressured all the way to Novodarivka. They have captured Rivnopil. They took Uruzhaine and also Blahodatne, and they captured Staromayoske, and then going to Makarivka, capturing it. They captured Starizove. They pushed all the way to the highway, or the main road west of Vremivka, and now threatening Neshkushne. These are all very, very recent developments. And of course, coming from the east, where the Russians basically secured Novodonetsk, they basically took Zolota Neva, stormed all the way west towards Velyka Novosilka, and conquer everything in between. And then on top of that, the Ukrainians continued to lose grounds very, very quickly, with places like Shataske, which I thought that would not fall so quickly, falling quickly, and allowing the Russians to push west towards Novi Koma and totally cut off the northern retreat of Velyka Novosilka. And this leads to yet another vector of attack coming from Shataske towards Velyka Novosilka. So two different directions, Shataske and Zolota Neva, two different vectors of attack towards Velyka Novosilka. And of course, And with this Shatarsky, the falling of Shatarsky, the Russians also managed to push northward and captured the Rozdone. So this is a crazy collapse of the entire region here, and it all was pretty much possible because of the fall of Vuhledar. Despite Vuhledar is pretty far away, Vuhledar made this possible. And so we're going to move eastward towards the Vuhledar region. And as you can see, the front line have left so far away. I need to zoom out or push up the map in order to see. The biggest thing that happened, I would say, is the collapse of Vuhledar in this sector. The fact that the Vuhledar fell basically, allows the Russians to basically go for Bohofia flanker, and this also, because of this tactical or strategic change, also led to the Ukrainians unable to hold Preshestivka, with the Russians pushing out and took Preshestivka, and then lead all the way up towards Novoyukrenka, and then push up to Mesimivka, and linked up with Bohofia flanker, push up towards Trudove. The Russian forces also, and the Vuhledar did not just fall because of a direct attack. Vuhledar fell because of a consistent grind by the Russian forces coming from Soloky direction towards the highway or the main road between Konstantinivka and Vuhledar. This push in the south of Novomikhailivka over here basically is what caused Vuhledar to collapse, because the pressure towards the reinforcement and resupply on Vuhledar basically caused it to be abandoned. And the Russians coming from Soloky took the road, cut off the road, and basically enters into Vodian and continued to push on to Bohovki flanker. They flanked up towards Katerinivka and Yelizavetivka, and they're putting pressure on Konstantinivka. As Novomikhailivka started to fall, the Russian forces starting to push towards Paraskovievka, and then all the pressure start to goes to Konstantinivka, and then Russian forces took Vuhledar, pressure downwards, and Konstantinivka was then collapsed, with the Russians then continue westward, going down the river, capturing the whole chain of settlement, with all this pressure coming from the north and from the south, coming from Bohofia as they crossed the entire front line from Konstantinivka all the way to Zeleny High, and then with the pressure coming from the north, and the complete loss of all the grounds in the south of Uspenivka, where the Russians are pushing towards Konstantinopolsk, caused Ukraine to abandon Uspenivka, which is a recent incident. So all these developments, one thing leads to another. Like, despite Vuhledar was a fortress city, its presence can only be secured because of the defense line west of Soloky, and that was the first domino that has fallen that eventually caused Vuhledar to collapse, and then collapsing the entire front line and the entire region here. You can see how wide Vuhledar's influence are. The distance, I believe, is around 6 kilometers. No, around 12. So its influence is around 12 kilometers. That's how big it is, and it probably leads even more than that to maybe 16 kilometers, 15 kilometers. So that's how strategically important Vuhledar is. Anyone to tell you that Vuhledar was never a strategically important city, slap them. Just slap them very hard. They need to wake up. Vuhledar is a extremely strategically important town. Very, very strategically important. And then Uspenivka is the other one. The fall of Uspenivka basically compromised this entire region. This is probably another 15 kilometers leading all the way to Constantinople, which is the next strategic settlement. So Uspenivka protects and overlooks this entire region, but Uspenivka, compared to Vuhledar, did not get as much good luck in terms of the good strategic posturing, as the Russian was pushing too hard on the Ukrainians, and they just unable to hold this position. So as the Uspenivka fell or falling, the Russian forces continued to put pressure, and they captured Dane and continued to attack into and start the battle of Kurakove, and Russian forces continue to move on from Velyka, took Maksimivka, Yasna and from Shatarsky, as mentioned just now, attacked Novi Koma, Rozdone, and then they now are pushing towards Rozliv and Bahate, and they have taken Sukiyali, they have taken Zelenivka, and they are pushing towards Constantinople, which is the other strategically important town that I was talking about. Now fighting is moving towards Yatarny, as the Russians are currently going to flank westward towards Yatarny and put pressure. Russian forces in the latest update has seems to have captured the entire power plant, and the Kharkov is on the verge of collapse. So very, very significant. No, and you see, this is not even frontline change. This like this, you can't even see where was the initial January 1 line here. I have to zoom out for you to even see it. No, it's so far out. And at the beginning of so we're going to move all the way to to this area, which was used to be known as the Marinka sector. Fighting was at Marinka, and then in the beginning of the year, Russians just captured Marinka not too long, and battle was at Georgievka, and they were struggling at Georgievka. Then Russians are also stuck at the south of Krasnohorivka and the west of and the east of Krasnohorivka. They were unable to break out. Then suddenly, somehow, everything just broke loose, and the Russians basically stormed in from two different directions at Krasnohorivka and continued to push westward, taking Hostray. And the Russians over at Kharkivka broke the backbone and go to Maximelinivka, links up with the Hostray forces, go straight down to Kharkov. And because of the fall of Krasnohorivka, which is actually a fortress city that is defending this sector, so that leads to the collapse of all the other front lines. So I'm going to scroll down a bit, and we're going to see more of these regions here. So the fall of Krasnohorivka basically means that Nevelsky becomes undefended, and the Russians basically storm in, and the Russians took Pervomaisky, went to Netelove, they went to Khalivka, they got stuck there for some time, and the Russian forces from Krasnohorivka continued to put pressure, and then they went all the way in here. And then created this massive salient called which I call the Nevelsky salient, where the Russian forces continued to put pressure as they were pushing down from Ukrainsk, and then going to Khernik, and as they continue to push westward in the and developing the Pokrov Front, the Nevelsky salient basically finally collapsed, with the Russian forces crushing in on the Ukrainians, taking Kalestinivka, and then and all these various small little towns, and the Russian forces took Alexandropol, Kharkivka, Otrivsky, and then continued to push westward, and took the entire northern shores of the Kharkivsky reservoir, and they reached Stary Terny, which is where the front line currently is. The Russian forces also continued to fight down from the Ukraine's and Sukirine region, continue to press down to Kreminna Balka, Novoselidivka, Vosnesenka, and push on the way down to Sonsivka, and then Zoria, and all the current front line over on the western part. So this is just massive. All this change is just massive, very, very massive. And if you want to see the distance, like for example, from the border, the front line at Nevelsky all the way to the current front line at Slovianka is 33 kilometers. If from the Marinka, the region, all the way to the current geolocation at Kharkov is 19 kilometers. Then and from Soloky, the front line, all the way to the furthest point at Novi Koma is 45 kilometers. These are all massive capture, and anyone that say the Russians are not winning, they're not paying attention, or they are just willfully or willingly getting brainwashed by all the cheerleaders. I wouldn't say they are propagandists, but I just say that they're cheerleaders for the Ukrainians. I'm 100% sure anyone that is reporting on the Ukraine war follow the maps. They know what the hell is happening. They just choose not to tell you that Ukraine is losing very, very badly. So as you can see, the front line is so interconnected. we're going to see something. Of course, the biggest battle and the most significant battle also in 2024 is Avdiivka. And in the DPA awards, many of you guys have voted, and Avdiivka was voted as the most strategic city or settlement in 2024. It's also voted, the Battle of Avdiivka was also voted the Battle of the Year in 2024. And it's hard to deny the impact of Avdiivka. Avdiivka protects a huge chunk of territory. Like, if you swing out 15 kilometers, like just now, what Vuhledar's influence was, you can see that it goes all the way to where the current front line is. It goes all the way to Cheretine, it goes all the way to north of Kreminna, they go to Alexandropil, which is where also the front line, it leads all the way to Netelove. And yeah, this was the region, that Avdiivka was protecting. The Russian forces, at the beginning of the year was already biting down on Avdiivka. The Russian forces was already in the north of Avdiivka. They have somewhat breakthrough in the south, and they have taken more positions in the north of Opitne, Vodiane, and then with some spectacular tunnel warfare and massive introduction of the fat bombs on the high-rise buildings. The Russian forces went from the south and from the north, basically forced the Ukrainian withdrawal. The Russians quickly pushed on and captured Krinichne, and then Avdiivka, and then pushing up north, capturing Pishchane, Tonenke, Avdiivka, and then they went to Semenivka, Badaichi, Sankove, and then after that they continued to push. And then when this defense line collapsed, like the lines really collapsed, that's when the avalanche come, because this was the final proper line of defense, and the Russians quickly pushed out to Ocheretine, Solovyove, Novoporovske, Novosilka, Persha, Umanske, Yasnobrodivka, and then Povomaisky broke through, capturing Neteleve. Of course, they went to Kharkivka and then developing the salient, as I mentioned just now. And then they closed down and linked up with everything as the Russians continued to push westward, mainly along the railway line to progress, and then the Zaporizhzhia, and then with all this progression along the railway line, they swing out and capture all the settlements all around it, pushing south to Pishchane and Kalinove, and then link up with Kharkivka, and yeah, the entire front just disappeared. And then developing into the Bakhmut Front that we know today, because Avdiivka was left so far away. Because by the time they reached Zaporizhzhia, they are 25 kilometers away from Avdiivka, too far away to call this Avdiivka Front, and we have started to call this area the Bakhmut Front. And by this point, from this Kalinove region, Kharkivka region, the Russian forces managed to go down the railway line from Progress, Zaporizhzhia, and then they hit Novohrodivka. They pushed down south towards Kalinove and link up with Kharkivka. They captured Mikhailivka, enters into Selidove, and then pushed out from Selidove, pushing up north, Vishneve, Petrivka, Novopustinka, Yuriivka, Novolenivka, Novodimitrivka, and then they push westward all the way in one line. This one line, the other line they push northwest towards Novotroyske, and then now they already reached Salone, Uspenivka, the Vokove, Pishchane. This is all the current front line. Vorozhenia, Shevchenko, Zelene, Dachansky. And then from Novohrodivka, they pushed to Lisivka, Sukiya. And then from this area, Olivka, Zuravka. And of course, from this area, Vasily, they hit Hrodivka, and they managed to capture Hrodivka. And then after some massive battle, they managed to secure the north of Novohrodivka and MKK, the Mykolaievka, Krasnaya, Krutya region. So this is like the other direction, the other spread, this other nerve spreading out from this area here. So that is the birth of the Bakhmut Front and the current situation that we are actually looking at in this sector. And again, we can't even, by looking at this screen, we don't even see the January 1st front line, which is actually all the way here. The northern flank is a bit more boring. Basically, it's just because of the Russians going down the railway line. This entire line in the north is largely just the Russians creating a buffer protecting the railway line. So, and then this line remains pretty static for most of the time, with the Russians continuing to push westward towards Pokrovsk. But honestly, it's unimaginable where the front line used to be here. And then at the end of the year, the Russians could actually threaten Pokrovsk. This is beyond my expectations. I never expected the Russians to go this far in a single year. So, and especially with no strong Ukrainian resistance, and the Russians managed to go this far is, quite rather crazy if you ask me. And then we go to the New York Front. In the New York Front, the Russian forces basically broke through at Sumy, Pivnishne Zalizne region. They attacked. They secured Mayorsk region and then pushed into Torex. As this is happening, the Russians suddenly have this massive breakthrough towards Avdiivka and then New York, and then they continued. Then they spread westward, securing this line, and then they slowly grind in as the Russians starting to put pressure on the Nelipivka region. The Russians managed to break New York, entered Nelipivka, and after the securing of New York, they actually push west and to secure New York. And with the Russians attacking into Nelipivka, the Ukrainian forces abandoned the entire chain of defense on the east of New York, and the Russians basically took all of them and come to more or less where the line is right now. Over the past few months, the Russian forces attacked all the way to Skibinivka, expanded control in Torex, taken the entire Zaporizhzhia micro district, and that's what we have right here in the Torex New York front. Moving over the Bakhmut Front, there is also significant change. Despite it's supposed to be a pretty sleepy front line, the Russians actually did also do a major offensive in the Bakhmut region, which with the Russian forces quickly taking Ivanivsky and all the parts west of Bakhmut, and they are now expanding in Chasiv, threatening control. They have allegedly taken Kharkiv and basically taken Kreminna as well. And with geolocation, it's confirmed the Russians have pushed south of Chasiv, threatening Stupovsky, heading towards Pishchane. And with all these indications, it seems that the Russians have fully secured Klishchievka and basically taking the entire eastern part of the canal. And now battles are usually reported towards Velyka. So yeah, that is Bakhmut Front. Also a lot of change. The distance, the greatest distance moved is like 8 kilometers. Definitely nothing compared to the entire diarrhea that is happening over in the rest of the Donetsk Front, over in the Vuhledar region, the Pokrovsk Front, Avdiivka Front. Bakhmut, in comparison is smaller, but frontline changes nevertheless. The Russians are pushing still in this sector. And over the Siversk Front, despite this is voted the most underwhelming front, the most underwhelming front actually have progressed too. Because people tend to forget, because usually Siversk is pretty quiet. The Russians actually over the past year managed to capture Spurny. They captured Ivano-Darivka. They secured the northwest of Spurny. They go all the way and captured Vimka, capturing and securing Vasily, capturing and securing Rozdolivka, pushed towards Berezhny, threatening Fedorivka, capturing all the hills north of Vasily, and conquering most of the railway line south of Vimka. And this on its own is actually pretty impressive. To be honest, this is actually pretty impressive because Siversk Front have traditionally, over the past 2.5, 3 years, has been the most strongest defense line the Ukrainians have, if you ask me. And the Russians still managed to have breakthroughs around this sector, although the breakthrough have slowed down at this moment. But this is still a strategically threatening situation for the Ukrainians. like the posture here was totally changed because of the Russian breakthrough. And even at Bilohorivka, we also see some changes with the Russian forces closing in on Bilohorivka since the beginning of the year. However, nothing much else. This is very, very tiny changes. Ukrainian forces does have their success over in the Kreminna Front. The Ukrainian forces managed to take take back some ground at Torske, at Dibrova, and even in the Srebyansky forestry and north of Kharkovivka. So actually, the Ukrainians actually have some success in the Kreminna Front with them taking some grounds, but these are not strategically important. This is very tactical, and it doesn't change the strategic situation at all. So unfortunately, these successes is not very, very meaningful. And then we have the Terny region. So this region here, it goes all the way up to Makievka, was one of these surprise breakthrough in this sector, where along the Zaporizhzhia River, which is actually a pretty difficult front line, very difficult to report, very difficult to understand, and somehow the Russians managed to have some success in this sector. They captured Makievka, amazingly, and they kicked out the Ukrainians in this sector. And what is this place? Nevelsky, and threatening Novolyubivka, taking the Novosadove, and they are on the verge of taking Terny as well as making some move on Yampolivka. And they basically kicked the Ukrainians out of the eastern part of the Zaporizhzhia River all the way down to Terny. Very, very significant actually, because this is such a heavily defended line, and this one of these lines that I think the Ukrainians are pretty proud of, because they pushed the Russians out of Kharkiv through this offensive in 2023, and the Russians are now pushing back. So this is yet another front line, and the distance here, let me distance of the biggest distance captured is around 9 kilometers, 9 or 8.5 kilometers, something like this. So that's the front line change in this sector. Moving up north, you can see there's not much changes, and then we have this breakthrough at Pishchane. This is also one of those shocking offensive that really changes the strategic situation. So we have to zoom in a little bit to understand. So Russian forces have been pushing over the Ivanivka region, pushing towards Stepova, Novoselivka, and they really managed to capture Kaislivka and Kotelivka. And however, the shocking thing was the advancement into Pishchane, and then they actually secured Terbaivka, pushing up north, and then they continue on to Kolonitskivka and capturing Kolonitskivka and securing it. They push down to Krylyakivka and capture it, cut off the crossing at Senkove, and goes to Zarizove, which is where the front line currently is. With Pishchane, the Russians continue to push south, and the pressure finally paid off around the last 2 months, where the entire salient around the south of Pishchane collapsed, with the Russians quickly taking all the grounds south of Pishchane, taking Berestove, taking Selivka, I think, Novoselivsky, and basically results in what we are seeing today, where the Pishchane Front is becoming a rhino, basically. So that's what it is. And this is such a long video. There's so much changes in 2024. I'm losing my voice just trying to go through all of this, the history behind all of this, which is why it's called Frontline History. This series I really wanted to do, but sometimes there's just too much content and too much things to do. Over the past year, I didn't manage to have time to go through frontline changes or frontline histories. So it's a very, very interesting video type, content type, where you can actually see the progress. Because if you follow daily, sometimes you just lose grasp on what the hell had happened. But when you see this, you can see that indeed the Russians have won a lot in 2024. It's crazy, and which is why sometimes people argue with me, like it's pretty meaningless to me, because it wouldn't make a lot of sense to me because I saw the change. And then over there at the Kupyansk Front, the Russian forces managed to actually break the Sinkivka defense line, which is significant on its own. The Russians actually took all of the forests on the west of Sinkivka, capturing Sinkivka, pushing south to Petropavlivka, and even threatening Kupyansk with entering Kupyansk at one point. And the entire eastern part of Sinkivka was also secured, south of Vishana, so that is the thing over this sector. But it's a small change like Bakhmut. The total movement is at most 4 kilometers. So like Bakhmut, this is a more of this very difficult front line. But even as difficult as Sinkivka, the Russians still managed to capture ground. So very, very impressive. And then in late December, the Russian forces actually crossed the river and attacked into Dvorichna as well as Zaporizhzhia. So this is still an ongoing operation. It's still pretty early it's in the infancy. It's still in the first month of offensive. It remains to be seen how far the Russians would go in this Dvorichna offensive. So definitely something to watch. This is very new. This is just a baby in terms of the this Ukraine war's context. These are all the traditional, these are all the front lines at the beginning of 2024. And now we go into the new front lines of 2024. And the first one to talk about is the Kharkiv Front. The Kharkiv Front, the Kharkiv offensive is the offensive where a lot of rumors about it. But I warned that the Russians have no reasons to go for Kharkiv. Strategically, it's not the right time. And when it happened, I did insist that it's still not a proper offensive. It's not a full-fledged offensive. Is at most the Russians are going to create a buffer, create a defense line, and they're going to stop. They're not going to go all the way to Kharkiv. And I was correct. The Russians did not go all the way for Kharkiv. The Russian forces basically ended at where this front line currently is. There's almost not much changes since the initial stage of the Kharkiv offensive. Russian forces stormed all the way down to Voschansk. Actually, we should zoom in. So we go to this sector first. So Russians storm in, capturing Platonivka quickly. They then attack into Okhiseve, Khatishev, and then they quickly storm down to Voschansk, and then battle begins. The battle of Voschansk began. And basically, the front line basically stuck along the river, which is over here. The river is around here. Basically stuck at the river. But the Russians never want to cross the river anyway, because this is a very, very good defense line for the Russians, which is what I think they are going to do. The Russians also continue to push east and then starting to threaten Taike. Similarly, Taike is where the front line ends. And that's where the Russians want to build a defense line, and that basically ends the story from this sector. And however, on the other side, the story is this was another line of attack with the Russians storming in through the forest and then attacking Vuhledar. They managed to capture Vuhledar, and then they continued to push on to Zaporizhzhia and managed to storm the front line basically at that point. So, and then the Russian forces quickly secured the entire region along the Siversk Donetsk River, and basically that's where the front line currently is right now at this moment as well. So this is the front line change in this sector. The distance traveled from the border all the way to at least Vuhledar is around 6.79 kilometers. So, and on the other side at Voschansk, from the border is around 6.45 kilometers. So it's a buffer-ish. It's not like a full-fledged offensive kind of capture. Clearly, if the Russians can break Vuhledar, they can conquer Voschansk. If they can take Avdiivka, they can easily go down further south. They did not, because they don't need to. It's not the right time. So this is what it is. The the Kharkiv offensive, of course, also happened over in the Lipsy sector, with the Russian forces attacking Nekushne in the major diversion, as the main push was over in this sector, where they took Zaporizhzhia, Kreminna, Zaporizhzhia, they took Lukyansk, and then they pushed south, securing the locations as they swing back and capture the chain of settlements, and then they go for Klipoke, and then the battle at Klipoke, basically went on for a long time with the Russian forces going for Lipsy, and then basically establish where the front line currently is. This Lipsy front line is actually pretty advantageous for the Russians. Of course, the Ukrainians have a good front line and defense line as well. The Russians will find it hard to push south, but the Ukrainians also find it hard to push north. So that is the perfect front line that the Russians want, which is a buffer zone. So, and the Ukrainians did try to go for Krylovka, and however, this was ill-fated as they met the Chechen forces, and then yeah, that's about it. There was no more update since. The Russians also managed to push in and captured Sukiski Kozachok, and basically until today, Sukiski Kozachok most likely is still under Russian control, and that is the main other change over in this region. And we move on, and then of course the elephant in the room, which is Kursk. The elephant is very, very Kursk, and this is the Kursk Front. And of course, a lot of things happened in the Kursk Front. The Ukrainian forces went all the way to Kreminna. They all the way to Kreminna. They went all the way, to this sector around here, southwest of Kreminna. They did try to threaten Glushkovo. They basically managed to break through, and then in the furthest point, they went all the way up to Safonovka, Kauchuk region. This is as far as the Ukrainians went. However, by the end of this year, all of this advancement is invisible. We can't see it because the front line looks like this right now. The Ukrainians managed to first take Sudja. Actually use the yellow color. They took Sudja, and then from Sudja, they fanned outwards in all different directions, and basically trying to catch the Russians confused. The Ukrainians also go on a smaller line, taking Blakovo, and then they continue to storm towards what's this place? Kamishnoye, and they basically went on this safari of sort, basically to confuse where they are. It was an amazing display of movement, maneuver warfare, and they were very, very successful. However, you can only maneuver for so long, because in the modern age, the problem is drones. The Russian was expanding its drone capabilities over 2024, and by the time of the Kursk offensive, the Russians have a significant drone surveillance capability, and a lot of these advances the Russians was watching, and Lancers after Lancers, FPV drone after FPV drone grind down the entire mobile force, and at the end, the Kursk offensive just cannot go on. The lines get static, and I did mention during my reporting of the Kursk offensive, I say that as long as the Ukrainians keep moving and keep going for weak spots, the Kursk offensive can continue. But the moment the front line becomes static and the front line becomes established, then the Ukrainians are going to suffer. And I think that's exactly what we have seen. The Ukrainians get grinded away, and until today, the Russians still looks like they are really spending more time just destroying Ukrainian forces rather than capturing grounds. They are more keen on grinding away the Ukrainian forces. Of course, I know the pro-Ukrainian perspective is that the Russians are dying in great numbers in the Kursk front, but no, like I said before, if you want to do analysis, always assume it's going to be 1-to-1. If you say that the Russians lose a lot of people, then the Ukrainians similarly lose a lot of people. So it have to go both ways. If you really want to do a very fair and neutral analysis, a very objective one, don't regard at all, disregard all the firepower advantage, the air superiority advantage that the Russians have. Because if you do that, clearly the Ukrainians are not going to be winning or killing more Russians. So this don't regard all the weaponry and advantage in heavy weapons and drones and air force. 1:1, you can, yeah. If you say the Russians lose a lot, then the Ukrainians lose a lot. But then if you look at the front line, the Ukrainians lost more and more grounds in their Kursk front. So the initial beginning, this entire front line, was lightly defended. There's only border guards. There's the police force, very minimal Russian troops. Basically, in fact, I feel like the Russians are basically tempting the Ukrainians to come in, and the Ukrainians took the bait. They came in, and it became a massive, massive massacre of capable troops. And I have to say, the Kharkiv offensive did the same, just that the Russians was the one attacking. The Kharkiv offensive draw a lot of capable Ukrainian troops into fighting at Kharkiv to stop this conquest of Kharkiv city. Despite that, no, it's actually a trap. It's a diversion. And when this happened, Niu-York Front collapsed. Donetsk Front, the Avdiivka start to struggle. Then the breakthrough get bigger and bigger, and then Vuhledar collapsed, and it's all started off because of the Kharkiv offensive. This Russian Kharkiv offensive to create a buffer zone, draw away the resources from the front lines, and yeah, that basically compound the problems faced by the front lines, the existing front lines. Kursk offensive, I would say, didn't do the same kind of impact, because this is a Ukrainian operation. Clearly, when the Russians are pushing into Kharkiv, the Ukrainians are still storing troops. They are still gathering the forces to launch a major offensive, and I believe that this group that was attacking Kursk was not exactly used in Kharkiv defense. They basically stored this force, and then they decided to make this massive punch into Kursk. So it did not really draw away. Kursk doesn't, in my opinion, doesn't really draw away equipment and troops as much as the Kharkiv offensive did. But what it does was that it demoralized the Ukrainian forces in all across the entire Ukraine front, because they were thinking that I'm struggling here, losing ground every day, and then you went on the offensive in Russia. Why? So, and so that's what we saw. And the Russians continue to make rounds in these regions, which there's really no point to go into the details, because it's an entirely new front, and you might as well just watch the Sibra. So anyway, so this is the frontline history for the entirety of 2024, where we look at the frontline change from the 1st of January 2024 to the 31st of December 2024, which is the SIBRAP, the last mapping that I just created today on the 1st of January of 2025. So this is the latest information, the latest mapping, and this is the reflection. So anyway, hope this is interesting to you. This is a very long video because it was a very eventful 2024. So thank you for watching. Do press the like button, subscribe. I hope this is interesting to you. And for those that still not convinced to press the subscribe button, I have no more voice. What else do you want me to do to give me your sub? So no subscribe. If you watch to this point, you should subscribe. And thank you for watching. Have a happy new year. And I hope that 2025 means the end of the Ukraine war, and people can stop dying. And people can return home, return to their family, and lead a peaceful life, and don't die for stupid reasons anymore. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next update.